Political and security crises in Libya have led to the death of 272 people already and nearly 1,300 wounded according to the latest figures of the World Health Organization. The situation becomes worrying since the assault of Marshal Haftar's troops on Tripoli. Still no way out of the crisis in Sudan. As talks resume Wednesday, the opposition announced Thursday morning a giant gathering in the capital of the country. These are our top stories. Stay tuned for more details in this newscast. The purpose of the visit by the International Monetary Fund's delegates as they meet with Gabonese Minister of Budget in Libreville is to revive the Gabonese economy. Therefore, programs are put in place that will help improve the economic relief of the country. But for these programs to work, there's need for monitoring. The program on the extended agreement under the credit facility launched in June 2017 is the main focus of this series of works from now until April 30th. To achieve the objectives defined by this program, the Gabonese government, in this case the Ministry of Budget, has undertaken reforms. Certainly painful reforms in some respects, however necessary to the improvement of the living conditions of the Gabonese populations. For the Gabonese authorities, this visit of the International Monetary Fund is far from being an interference. At the end of this series of technical meetings, a session of restitution will be organized in a few days with the Gabonese Ministers of Budget and Economy. An update will be made on execution of the month of March and the forecast for this program for June 2019, which is expected to be completed this year. The opposition boycotted the election of the Assembly Speaker as a way to protest against the majority coalition that brings together supporters of Felix Tshisekedi and former President Joseph Kabila. According to opposition MPs from Lamuka coalition, yesterday's vote reminds of old days of Stalinism. Their statement comes on the anniversary of a famous speech by former dictator Mobutu, paving the way for multi-party politics on April 24, 1990. But who is Janine Mabunda? This is a lady that has several times held ministerial posts. She was also a central bank official and former President Kabila's advisor on sexual violence and the recruitment of children into armed groups until December 2018 election. She is a member of Joseph Kabila's PPRD party and his political coalition, the Common Front for Congo. She was elected as the only candidate to lead this institution after bitter negotiations with other political families. Mrs. Mabunda is the second woman in DRC history to lead the lower house of parliament. She and 5 other members of the final bureau were elected with the exception of the opposition rapporteur, Lamuka. Jean-Marc Kabund from President Tshisekedi's side was elected first vice president. The election of Janine Mabunda at the head of the Congolese National Assembly happens 3 months after the inauguration of the president. Since the return of violence on April 4th in Libya, many people have lost their lives so far. According to the report of the World Health Organization, at least 272 people have been killed and nearly 1,300 wounded among civilians. On Twitter, the World Health Organization called for a temporary halt to hostilities between the two sides, calling on them to abide by the international humanitarian law. The fightings have also displaced 35,000 people and displacement is continuing at an increasing rate every day. According to the Deputy UN Envoy in Libya, adding to these reports are only lowest estimates. Maria Dovale Robero also mentioned the case of migrants, asylum seekers and refugees, of whom 3,600 are in detention centers in areas close to the front lines. The fighting and bombing also have an impact on social services, including health, potentially on water, sanitation, and electricity, she added. Questioned about the role of international powers, the assistant to the UN envoy in Libya said that any country that has influence should use it to ensure that civilians are protected and are as little as possible affected by the fighting. Marshal Khalifa Haftar, considered as the strongman of eastern Libya, launched an offensive on Tripoli on April 4th, headquarters of the Government of National Unity. After a rapid progression, his forces keep knocking at the doors of the capital but causing enormous damage. Libya has plunged into insecurity and chaos since the fall of former leader Mohammed Gaddafi in 2011 and has been trying to implement a democratic transition ever since. The coalition of opposition parties has called for a march of more than 1 million people in Khartoum this Thursday. By this act, the opposition intends to put pressure on the military government to transfer power to civilians as soon as possible. Tuesday, several demonstrators came to reinforce those already present in the capital coming from Atbara, city located 250 kilometers north of Khartoum, after the threat of the African Union suspending Sudan and the meeting of the heads of states in Egypt in Cairo. It was imperative for both parties to meet to discuss the possibility of an agreement to end the crisis. Wednesday night's meeting at the presidential headquarters between representatives of the civil protest movement and the Transitional Military Council was crucial, since it allowed the military to announce an agreement that takes into account most of the demands of the leaders of the protest. At the end of this meeting on Wednesday evening, the two parties agreed to initially establish a joint committee to agree on a number of issues, including the transfer of power to civilians demanded by protesters and the African Union. In the United States, former Democratic Vice President Joe Biden has announced his candidacy for the White House in 2020. The 76-year-old former Vice President of Barack Obama has already dominated polls for months from the very beginning of the campaign towards winning the Democratic nomination. With an image of a moderate unifying figure and persistent popularity despite recent polemics on strong gestures of affection, Joe Biden wrote on Twitter that the fundamental values of America, the U.S. rank in the world, their very democracy, everything that made America strong was at stake. That's why he announced his candidacy for the presidential elections of the United States of America. Political and security crises in Libya have led to the death of 272 people already and nearly 1,300 wounded according to the latest figures of the World Health Organization. The situation becomes worrying since the assault of Marshal Haftar's troops on Tripoli. Still no way out of the crisis in Sudan. As talks resume Wednesday, the opposition announced Thursday morning a giant gathering in the capital of the country. That's all for our newscast today. Stay tuned on Gabon 24 for more news.